Mesa Esperanza awoke each morning under a pale wash of dawn that settled softly over its dusty streets. The town lay against the unforgiving expanse of the high plains, scattered wooden structures long bleached by relentless sun, half forgotten, windmills groaning as they turned, and a single dirt thoroughfare where tumbleweeds, whipped by the wind, skittered like restless spirits. It was a place where time seemed to linger, aging every building and soul that lingered within. For most, Mesa Esperanza was home, however unforgiving its rhythms. For Alicia Mercer, it was both refuge and cage. Alicia was 17, slim and lithe from years of surviving on the edges of this frontier outpost. Her hair was the deep mahogany of damp earth, and her eyes carried the same intensity as storm clouds gathering overhead. Dark, unreadable, and full of silent promise. She had never known her parents, having lost them when she was a child too. Bandits who had raided the family homestead miles to the west. Since then, she'd been taken in by Sister Agnes, a surly woman with a heart that rarely let itself be seen. Alicia's world was confined to the orphanage that served as her home, the dusty general store where she worked to help keep roofs over sheltering boards, and the outskirts of town where she roamed as though searching for something she couldn't, a name. She rose before the sun on that morning, light slipping through the cracked window shutters of her small shared room in the orphanage. The coiled rope of sleep loosened from her muscles as she dressed in a faded calico dress patched at the hem, and laced well-worn boots over calloused feet. The chill in the air lingered, though June was well upon the land. Nights always carried a ghost of cold that no fire could banish entirely. Alicia stole out before anyone else stirred, careful to remain silent so that Sister Agnes wouldn't notice her absence. She knew better than to test the older woman's patience. Her first steps took her along the dry wash that cut behind the abandoned saloon, an imposing relic from 20 years past, when the railroad had briefly touched this land. The saloon's facade, half collapsed, towered over her like a skeletal reminder of better days. Wood beams sagged, and the swinging doors hung on rusted hinges. Alicia had explored its interior often, each time discovering new graffiti scratched into its rotting planks, or fragments of broken bottles half buried in the dirt floor. But this morning she paused at the threshold to listen, her breath drifting among the shadows. She had begun hearing rumors, horses missing, an unfamiliar horseman seen near the rocks by the Stockman's Gulch. Most said it was a Comanche scout, though few dared approach to confirm. The orphanage's food stores were meager, stale cornbread, salt pork, and beans so dry they fought swallowing. Alicia often carried extra rations in her satchel when she ventured beyond the town's borders. Today, she settled by a crumbling adobe wall in the waning light of dawn to peel slices of salted pork from a chunk she'd hidden beneath her skirt earlier. Each bite reminded her that hunger was a constant companion on the plains. But as she sat with her meal, she noticed the hoofprints pressed deep into the soft soil, prints too small and fine to belong to the large, robust horses that belonged to the ranchers near Mesa Esperanza. These were tracks of a stealthy animal, likely guided by someone who knew this land's secret hollows and waterholes. She traced the hoofprints with her boot toe, feeling a thrill of discovery. Curiosity pulled her deeper into the scrubland, following the tracks as they wound through sagebrush and tumbleweeds. Despite all warnings to stay closer to town, Alicia had always felt drawn to the unknown. Each day she chafed against the confines of the orphanage, as though some buried piece of her soul called her beyond fences and fences of judgment. The tracks led her to a clearing ringed by mesquite and cottonwood. There, at the edge of a shallow ravine, she saw him. A Comanche man, hunched beside a collapsed pony, his body slumped forward as though he carried the weight of the world across his shoulders. He wore breechcloth and deerskin leggings that were cracked along several seams, evidence of hardship or maybe pride in wearing traditional garb despite approaching extinction. His hair, long and black as a raven's wing, was tangled with sage and small clumps of dust. He leaned over the pony, his fingertips resting on its flank, as though drawing strength from the animal's breath. When he lifted his head, their eyes met. Hers were wide with fear and empathy. His held the hollow look of a man who had not eaten well and was not sure if he would see another sunrise. For a heartbeat, they stood locked in primal silence, each unspeaking barrier between them as real as the ravine that separated their worlds. Elysia's heart hammered so loud she feared he might hear it. She knew the townsfolk would not trust a Comanche, especially not one who had wandered so far from his tribe. Yet when she studied his face, high cheekbones, deep-set eyes, a sharp, aquiline nose, she felt not fear, but compassion. He was human, wounded and vulnerable in this harsh land. Slowly, Elysia knelt and reached into her satchel. From inside, she withdrew a small leather bag containing beans, a few slices of cornbread, and a wedge of cheese. She called out in a voice barely more than a whisper, "I have food. Are you hurt badly?" She kept her voice measured, gentle, so he would understand she meant no harm. He did not respond at first. He remained crouched, his head bowed as though gathering strength to speak. Elysia's mind raced. Would he attack? Would the townspeople find them and demand she surrender him? She paused a moment, weighing the risk against the ache in her chest for someone so desperate. Finally, he rose slowly, straightening with surprising grace. He did not draw his weapon. She saw no bow or rifle at his side, only his pride and his survival instinct. "Food," he said in broken English, voice low as the rumble of distant thunder. Hungry." Elysia laid the bag on the sun-baked ground. "Sit here," she instructed softly. He hesitated, but hunger overcame suspicion. He sank to the earth, his boots kicking up a faint plume of dust. She sat opposite him and removed a battered tin plate from her satchel, dividing the beans and offering him cornbread. His eyes stayed fixed on the meal, as though he could not trust his own hands to feed him. As he ate, Elysia watched him. Each bite he took seemed to restore a fragment of his humanity, but she could see the hollow depths of his ribs, the way his cheeks caved inward, as though his face no longer held enough warmth to guide him. "Why did you come here?" she asked. Her voice trembled slightly, but she forced herself to remain calm. He finished the last bite and licked his fingers for any stray crumbs. He looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse flinch. "My horse. Died. No water, no game. I rode days until I saw smoke. I thought a chance to find water." Elysia frowned. "Smoke? That is from the town. You came to Mesa Esperanza." He nodded. "Comanche hate these towns, but I desperate." The first light of morning filtered through the gaps in the barn's weathered planks, painting delicate streaks across the dirt floor. Elysia's sleep had been restless, her mind awash with anxiety and purpose. She rose before the sun fully, claimed the sky, careful not to wake the Comanche warrior she had come to call Lone Elk, a name she had bestowed upon him after noticing the solitary grace with which he moved, even in exhaustion. She settled beside him, pulling the worn blanket tighter around his shoulders. He stirred, eyelids fluttering as he sought to clear the veil of dreams from his vision. When he recognized her, relief flooded his gaze. He attempted a nod, but weakness stole his strength before he could complete the motion. "Water," he croaked, voice rough as gravel. Elysia rose and retrieved the bucket she had fetched the night before. Lone Elk drank deeply, as though he feared the water would vanish if he hesitated. Elysia watched, her chest tightening with empathy. She offered a morsel of cornmeal mush from a small pot she'd stoked to warmth in the barn's shadow. He accepted it with grateful caution, dipping his fingers into the warm yellow paste and bringing it to his lips. Each swallow seemed to revive a piece of his spirit. Elysia remembered her own hunger after running away from the orphanage days earlier, how every crumb had felt like stardust, and her heart clenched around the memory. Lone Elk finally set the tin plate aside, his breathing steadier, but veins still, stark beneath his skin. He reached out a hand, brushing Elysia's sleeve as though to anchor himself to her presence. "Thank you," he murmured, his English improving but still halting. "I must find water for my people. They will die without me." Elysia's gaze lingered on him, mind racing. "You must rest more," she urged. "Once you're stronger, we will ride out together. I can guide you to deep water spring beyond the Badger Hills. I know the way." His eyes narrowed, reflecting a cautious hope. "You risk much. If they find me here, they will kill me." His voice trembled not from fear alone, but from an old grief that sang at the edges of his memory. Elysia nodded, steeling herself. "I know, but I cannot leave you to die. Not after what you did for me." She drew closer, lowering her voice to a near whisper. "When I found you, you had saved the pony from its wounds. You never hesitated to feed him, though you had nothing. You shared the last of your water with him. I saw it in your eyes. You care, Lone Elk. I honor that. Let me help. Repay the debt." He looked at her then, as though seeing the first light of morning filtered through the gaps in the barn's weathered planks, painting delicate streaks across the dirt floor. Elysia's sleep had been restless, her mind awash with anxiety and purpose. She rose before the sun fully, claimed the sky, careful not to wake the Comanche warrior she had come to call Lone Elk, a name she had bestowed upon him after noticing the solitary grace with which he moved, even in exhaustion. She settled beside him, pulling the worn blanket tighter around his shoulders. He stirred, eyelids fluttering as he sought to clear the veil of dreams from his vision. When he recognized her, relief flooded his gaze. He attempted a nod, but weakness stole his strength before he could complete the motion. "Water," he croaked, voice rough as gravel. Elysia rose and retrieved the bucket she had fetched the night before. Lone Elk drank deeply, as though he feared the water would vanish if he hesitated. Elysia watched, her chest tightening with empathy. She offered a morsel of cornmeal mush from a small pot she'd stoked to warmth in the barn's shadow. He accepted it with grateful caution, dipping his fingers into the warm yellow paste and bringing it to his lips. Each swallow seemed to revive a piece of his spirit. Elysia remembered her own hunger after running away from the orphanage days earlier, how every crumb had felt like stardust, and her heart clenched around the memory. Lone Elk finally set the tin plate aside, his breathing steadier, but veins still, stark beneath his skin. He reached out a hand, brushing Elysia's sleeve as though to anchor himself to her presence. "Thank you," he murmured, his English improving but still halting. "I must find water for my people. They will die without me." Elysia's gaze lingered on him, mind racing. "You must rest more," she urged. "Once you're stronger, we will ride out together. I can guide you to deep water spring beyond the Badger Hills. I know the way." His eyes narrowed, reflecting a cautious hope. "You risk much. If they find me here, they will kill me." His voice trembled not from fear alone, but from an old grief that sang at the edges of his memory. Elysia nodded, steeling herself. "I know, but I cannot leave you to die. Not after what you did for me." She drew closer, lowering her voice to a near whisper. "When I found you, you had saved the pony from its wounds. You never hesitated to feed him, though you had nothing. You shared the last of your water with him. I saw it in your eyes. You care, Lone Elk. I honor that. Let me help. Repay the debt." He looked at her then, as though seeing her soul for the first time. He nodded, the movement a silent agreement that bound them both to their shared hope. By midday, the sun had spilled onto the plains in a relentless glare. Elysia crept back into town under the pretense of work at the general store. She purchased sacks of grains, cornmeal, beans, and a small quantity of coffee beans hidden among stale flour sacks. The proprietor, old Mr. Hawkins, eyed her warily, but said nothing when she slipped coins across the counter. At the orphanage, Sister Agnes's watchful gaze followed Elysia as she nosed her way past the kitchen. The older woman sat hunched over, a ledger, as though counting sins as carefully as she counted blessings. Elysia dared not meet her eyes. She offered a curt nod and disappeared down the hallway, placing her haul in the linen closet. She prided herself on her memory. Sister Agnes rarely disturbed that closet. Under cover of twilight, Elysia returned to the barn, where Lone Elk lay sheltered beneath the coarse blanket. She set down the sacks of grain and began filling empty tins and water skins. He watched her, silent gratitude plain on his gaunt face. When she laid out the provisions, he helped pack them into an old saddlebag she had smuggled from the general store. "Tonight I ride west," he said. "If I do not return, you will be punished." She squared her shoulders, resisting the tremor in her voice. "I will take responsibility. I will say I helped you because I believed you were innocent. I will stand. Ibayu." He studied her for a long moment, pride and concern flickering in his dark eyes. Finally, he nodded, standing on unsteady legs. Each movement he made seemed to unravel a thread of pain, but also to remind Elysia of the strength that still burned within him. She reached out to steady him, pressing her palm against his torso. His ribs expanded beneath her hand, a bare whisper that he would survive. Nightfall wrapped Mesa Esperanza in a dense cloak of silence. The townsfolk shuttered their windows, lit candles, and whispered prayers that the restless world would keep its distance. Few knew that Elysia Mercer slipped out under the stars, leading a proud warrior by the reins of his wounded pony. The air smelled of sage and secrets. Elysia's heart rattled like coins in a tin cup, fear and exhilaration mingling in her chest. They moved swiftly down the arroyo that cut deep into the plateau's edge. Lone Elk's pony, despite its injuries, gamely followed Elysia's lead. She had wrapped its wounds with gauze soaked in brandy and water, a remedy that burned like fire, but prevented infection. Each step the animal took seemed to echo Lone Elk's determination. The path to the Badger Hills was treacherous. Sharp rocks jutted like broken teeth, and the earth beneath their feet crumbled into dusty embers. The moon glowed pale above, guiding them through narrow passes that twisted like serpents around the hills. At each bend, Elysia paused, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. Her muscles tensed at the sound of coyotes howling in the distance, and the memory of angry townsfolk rode upon the wind. Lone Elk walked beside her, leaning heavily on the saddle. His breath came in ragged shards, but his spirit remained unbroken. Elysia could sense his pain with every labored exhale. She kept to her mission, guiding him around exposed ridges and toward cover. Suddenly, from a rise ahead, the jingle of saddles and the low murmur of male voices reached their ears. Elysia froze, pressing a finger to her lips. She crouched behind, a jutting outcropping of red sandstone, forcing Lone Elk down behind her. Their forms vanished in the shadows. Her pulse pounded so loudly she feared it would betray them. 3 riders appeared at the crest, masked men with rifles slung across their saddle horns, faces obscured by dust and malice. They scanned the arroyo, laughter breaking the stillness. Like gruesome thunder, Elysia recognized the rough shape of Sheriff Danvers among them, though his eyes were proud as a hawk's, eyes that had betrayed no trust when he first saw Lone Elk in the barn. "You see anything?" the second rider asked, voice hoarse. "Stop this madness!" Daniel's voice rang out clear as a bell. His eyes darted between the sheriff, the masked men, and Elysia and Lone Elk. "What's going on here?" Sheriff Danvers snapped. "He's a Comanche! He attacked my men!" Daniel dismounted, striding forward. He placed a hand on Danvers's shoulder. "Danvers, hold your men. Now speak, girl." Alicia's chest heaved, tears stinging her eyes. "He is not your enemy. He's only here to find water for his people. When he came to town, he was weak and starving. I hid him in the barn and nursed him back. He's done nothing wrong." Lone Elk stood on unsteady legs, his eyes glistening in the moonlight, equal parts fury and fatigue. He lifted a trembling hand. "I ask only to pass, to lead my people to water." Daniel studied him, and then his gaze drifted to the sheriff's men. "We had no right to chase him. Orders came from the governor's office to guard the water sources, not to slaughter every Comanche we see." He paused, placing a reassuring hand on Alicia's shoulder. "Thanks to her, this man is alive." His voice softened. "Danvers, let him. Go, send word to the reservation that help will be coming." The sheriff glared at Daniel, but finally dropped his rifle. The masked men followed suit, stepping away from their horses. Lone Elk exhaled, the tension draining from his body. He turned to Alicia, offering a small nod of respect. For a moment, they stood in silent communion beneath the moonlit sky, a fragile alliance forged in desperation. Daniel approached them both, extending a flask toward Lone Elk. "Drink this. It's my own whiskey, strong, but will give you strength for the journey ahead." Lone Elk accepted the flask, tipping his head back. The sharp burn of alcohol slid down his throat, igniting a spark he had not felt since leaving his camp. He handed the flask back, bowing his head in gratitude. Alicia stepped forward. "We should leave now, while they sleep. The path to deep water. Spring is stained with briar and snakes. We need every moment." Daniel nodded. "I'll ride back to town and tell Sister Agnes you're safe. I'll say you guided him through the arroyo where my men lost sight of you. That's enough for them. Questions won't come this way, but this is the last help I can give. After this, you carve your own path." Lone Elk's gaze flicked between Daniel and Alicia. "I thank you both. I will not forget your kindness." As they set off toward the Badger Hills, the three figures, Alicia, Lone Elk, and Daniel, moved through the shadowed landscape like ghosts, bound by a singular purpose. Behind them, Mesa Esperanza slumbered, unaware of the fragile hope fluttering. Away beneath its watchful sky, the hills loomed ahead, silhouettes against the star-bright canvas. The road to Deepwater Spring wound steeply upward, a gauntlet of rocky inclines and hidden ravines. The night air carried the chorus of crickets, punctuated by the distant cry of an owl. Alicia's breath flattened in her chest as she led Lone Elk, each step a prayer that he would find strength enough to endure. Halfway up the incline, Lone Elk faltered, his body swaying as though caught between worlds. The pony collapsed beneath, its own weight, a final breath of life escaping in a lonely whinny. Alicia rushed to its side, cradling its head in her lap as tears blurred her vision. Lone Elk knelt beside her, his lips quivering as he pressed his face to the pony's matted mane. "No," he whispered, voice fractured. "He gave me strength. He was more than a pony. He was my brother." Alicia wrapped the blanket around the pony, to keep its final warmth at bay. She stood, wiping her eyes. "We can't stay. We must keep moving." Lone Elk placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip trembling but his resolve returning. "You're right. We honor him by living." They buried the pony in a shallow grave beneath a gnarly mesquite tree, each shovelful of earth a farewell to a loyal companion. As Alicia tamped the final clod of dirt over the grave, she glimpsed sunrise igniting the horizon, banners of pink and gold unfurling across the sky. She felt Lone Elk's eyes on her, gratitude and sorrow entwined. "Come," she urged, gently. "The spring waits, and your people need you." With renewed purpose, they pressed on. The climb grew steeper, the air thinner, each step more punishing than the last. Alicia's boots slipped on loose scree. Lone Elk leaned on her, drawing from her warmth as much as his own will. Between them lay a chasm of culture and history, a chasm bridged by acts of compassion that neither fully understood. As they crested the ridge, the world tumbled away beneath them. Before their eyes lay a vast basin, a mosaic of sagebrush and wildflowers broken by a silver ribbon of water, winding through the valley. The deep water, spring gleamed like liquid moonlight beneath the rising sun. Alicia gasped, pointing. Lone Elk's face softened with awe. Tears brimmed in his eyes, a rare surrender of the stoic mask he wore. "Water," he breathed. "My people will live." Elysia smiled, though her heart clenched with the knowledge that their journey had only begun. Far beyond the valley, dangers lurked, bandits drawn to waterholes, other tribes seeking revenge, the unforgiving wilderness that had already claimed so much. Lone Elk knelt at the water's edge, cupping his hands to drink. Elysia knelt beside him, tasting the cool liquid that carried hope in its crystalline depths. As they surged with renewed life, she sensed the weight of destiny settling upon her shoulders. She would no longer be just a girl from Mesa Esperanza. She would be a guardian, a bridge between two worlds. Behind them, the horizon stretched endlessly, and the sun climbed higher, scattering shadows into the dunes. But before triumph could be savored, a cry broke the air. A desperate, piercing scream carried on a wind that whipped the grasses into a frenzy. Elysia and Lone Elk sprang to their feet, eyes darting toward the eastern ridge. A column of dust rose, silhouettes galloping in urgent pursuit. Elysia's blood turned to ice. Their sanctuary threatened to shatter. "They come," she whispered, voice barely audible above her pounding heart. Lone Elk's eyes flicked between her and the onrushing riders. His jaw clenched. "They seek blood. We ride now." But as they turned, another rider burst from the brush, a lone figure clad in leather and turquoise, moving with the silent grace of a mountain cat. He raised his hands in greeting. "Lone Elk, Elysia, wait, I carry a message." The world seemed to halt. Elysia inhaled sharply, sensing that whatever fate lay ahead, their lives were entwined by forces far greater than any of them could imagine. The sun climbed, the dust billowed, and the promise of hope collided with the relentless drumbeat of danger. A cold wind swept through the camp, snuffing out torch flames and carrying whispers of dread. The Lakota warriors tensed, sensing the presence of an intruder. Lone Elk's gaze sharpened, and he moved toward the edge of the teepee circle. Bow drawn. Elysia knelt beside the fallen feast table, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She sensed the shift, not merely in the wind, but in fate itself. Everyone's eyes turned toward the approaching figure, whose silhouette slumped beneath the weight of its own shame. As the lone rider drew closer, the flicker of torchlight revealed a familiar face, Sheriff Danvers. His once authoritative posture had crumpled, and terror flickered in his eyes. Lone Elk lowered his bow, confusion and wariness warring within his dark eyes. Elysia rose, moving beside him. "Why are you here?" she called, voice steady despite her racing heart. Danvers dismounted, falling to his knees in the snow, rifle clattering beside him. I was wrong," he stammered, words tangled in his own guilt. "Your actions, Elysia, they saved my people from the bandit king's vengeance. I've come to beg forgiveness." A hush spread through the camp. The Lakota warriors, faces painted red for war, turned that color now with curiosity and silent judgment. Lone Elk approached Danvers, bow still in hand. "Explain." Danvers bowed his head. "The bandits you defeated served the Bandit King, an outlaw who controls the trade routes. He's more ruthless than any Comanche or white man in these parts. He's vowed vengeance for the loss of his men." Elysia's heart clenched. "You knew this and sent them. You risked my people's lives. Why?" Danvers raised a trembling hand. I thought an attack on you and Lone Elk might unite my town against you, keep them from allying with the Comanche. I was blind. I see now that honor matters. I was wrong to judge you. Lone Elk's gaze hardened. Your cowardice could have doomed us all. Before Danvers could respond, a distant shout rose, slicing through the night. Fierce voices, guttural and angry, rose from the west ridge, voices that echoed like a storm looming on the horizon. "They're coming!" Elysia cried, heart slamming against her chest. The Lakota warriors snapped to attention, faces grim. The hoofbeats thundered, heavy, relentless riders bearing torches and rifles, sweeping down the hill like a wave of fury. At their forefront gleamed the cruel grin of the Bandit King, his silhouette framed by the flames carried by his men. He reined his stallion to a halt, spurs glinting in the firelight. "Lone Elk! Elysia!" he bellowed. "Come out and face your doom! No tribe or girl can save you from my wrath." The Lakota formed a tight line before the camp, rifles ready, lances lowered, feathers dancing like embers in the wind. Lone Elk stepped forward, bow strung taut. The Bandit King laughed, dismounting. With regal cruelty, his black coat swirled around him. "I offer you a choice," he sneered. "Surrender your girl, and I'll let your tribe live. Refuse, and I'll burn your camp to the ground." Elysia's gaze snapped to Lone Elk. "Fight! We do not surrender to cowards." Lone Elk's eyes flicked to the Kalpik willow burning on the camp's sacred fire pit. He inhaled deeply, drawing strength from the land and the spirits of his ancestors. "You will not spill blood here tonight, Bandit King. You will never claim her." The Bandit King's lip curled. "So be it. Kill them all." Chains of battle roared to life. Firelight flickered on rifles as Lakota warriors advanced. Elysia dove behind a boulder, her heart unfurling a battle cry of its own. She drew her bow. With a calm ferocity, arrow notched and ready, the Bandit King raised his pistol, firing at Lone Elk. The shot rang out, echoing across the valley. Lone Elk plummeted to one knee, clutching his shoulder where blood seeped through his deerskin. His bow clattered to the ground. Elysia's breath stalled in her lungs until rage shattered her fear. She took aim, focusing on the Bandit King. Her arrow flew like a meteor, striking the outlaw's arm and shattering his grip on his pistol. He bellowed, stumbling back. At that moment Lone Elk rose, his robes billowing in the wind. He grasped his spear with a roar, launching himself toward the Bandit King. Their collision resounded like thunder. Metal clashed and sparks danced. When spear met blade, Elysia sprang to her feet, loosing arrow after arrow into the encroaching bandits. Each shot found its mark. A groaning man collapsing into the snow, a horse rearing and falling under the weight of its rider's final breath. The Lakota's rifles joined her arrows, filling the air with muzzle flashes and roaring defiance. The Bandit King swung his blade at Lone Elk, forcing the warrior back. Lone Elk danced around the slash, avoiding the deadly arc by a hair's breadth. He feinted, then drove his spear home, striking the outlaw's thigh. The Bandit King howled, tumbling from his mount as Lone Elk's blade clove through his leather coat. Elysia watched in horror as the outlaw tumbled, sparks flying when his blade struck the frozen earth. In his final act of cruelty, he lunged for Lone Elk's heart. But Lone Elk's reflex was faster. Twisting aside, he drove his blade through the bandit's chest. As the Bandit King crumpled, the valley shook with the war cries of the Lakota. Elysia raced to Lone Elk's side, heart trembling as she saw his blood soak his leggings. "No," she screamed, cradling him as he sank into the snow. His chest rose and fell with labored breaths. He looked at her, eyes burning. "I could not have done this without you." "Stop talking," she whispered, tears carving paths down her cheeks. She pressed her hand to his wound, seeking to staunch the flow. Lone Elk smiled, though pain etched every line of his face. "Promise me. You will stay with the tribe." His voice faded and he slumped. "No!" Elysia trembled, shaking him. Lone Elk, don't leave me. A Lakota medicine man knelt beside them, pressing a handful of powdered sage and crushed willow bark into Lone Elk's wound. He chanted, weaving a spell that hummed with the magic of the earth. Elysia gripped Lone Elk's hand. "Stay with me. I need you." His dark eyes flickered, and for a moment he seemed to return to her, a man shaped by laughter and compassion, not just battle. "I am here," he whispered. The medicine man placed a calming hand on Lone Elk's chest. The bleeding slowed. Though his strength was drained, the valley fell silent, save for his labored breathing. Elysia cradled his head in her lap, the taste of fear bitter in her mouth. She stared at the battle-scarred slope, where the bodies of the fallen bandits lay in grotesque testament to the cost of violence. As dawn's pale light climbed the horizon, the Lakota gathered around the fallen. The chief rode up to Elysia, his eyes heavy. "He will survive," the chief said quietly, "but the spirits demand a sacrifice. The spring remains safe, but you, daughter of two worlds, must now become its guardian in truth. You must remain here, forever." Elysia's breath caught. "But I belong with him. He's my life." The chief fixed her with solemn eyes. "Your life is here. He fights for you, but you fight for us. The spirits have spoken." Elysia's world trembled. She looked down at Lone Elk, whose eyes fluttered open. He nodded, understanding passing between them. "I will stay," she whispered. "For you, for him, for this land." The elder placed a feather crown on her head, 3 white feathers braided with red sinew. "So it is done. You are now the keeper of the spring." Elysia's heart faltered. She had found her home, but this sacrifice echoed like a hollow drum within her. She would watch over the spring, cradle the tribe's hope, and guard it against any who dared defile it. Lone Elk reached up, bracing his hand against her cheek. "Together." His voice was faint, but his resolve sure. Elysia nodded, her tears frozen on her lashes. She kissed his forehead, pressing her promise into his skin. As the sun climbed, the valley warmed. The Lakota began preparing a new camp at the spring, one that would endure the winter's bite. Elysia stood beside Lone Elk, her cloak billowing. In the breeze, she looked east toward the land of her birth and felt only the pull of the plains and the rhythm of the spring's waters. She was no longer an orphan. She was the daughter of the plains. Snow fell in ragged flakes that winter, dusting the valley where the spring lay hidden like a jewel in the frozen earth. Elysia stood on the crest of a low ridge, her eyes scanning the swirling glint of the snowfall. Below her, the Lakota encampment. Around the spring was a constellation of flickering lights and curling smoke. She tugged her fur-lined cloak tighter, the braid of eagle feathers at her back, a reminder of the promise she had made by Lone Elk's side. A half-moon hung in the pre-dawn sky, pale and uncertain, as though the world hesitated to welcome the harsh season. Elysia's breath curled in the air, the cold biting through leather leggings to numb her knees. She knelt, pressing her gloved hand against the frozen ground. Beneath her palm, the earth was alive, thudding faintly like a heartbeat. The spring's waters still ran, warmed by the deep currents that no winter chill could extinguish. She closed her eyes, drawing in the damp, mineral-laced scent of the land. When she opened her eyes, she saw Lone Elk emerging from the teepee nearest. The spring, his form outlined by the dancing flames of a lantern. His breath puffed in white clouds, and he wore the painted war face of crimson and charcoal, markings not of battle, but of guardian's vigilance. He carried a birch-root water scoop, filling it at the spring's edge to distribute to the people, who had gathered for the morning meal. Elysia rose, descending the ridge to meet him. Ranger boots crunched in the icy soil. "They are hungry today," she said, though her voice felt brittle in the cold. Lone Elk glanced at her, eyes softened by dawn's pale glow. The buffalo herds have moved south earlier than we expected. We depend on the spring, but with the snow, gathering food is harder than ever. Elysia's chest tightened. The tribe's storerooms held dried meat and root vegetables, but those supplies would only last so long. She placed a gloved hand on Lone Elk's shoulder. "I will go with the hunters tomorrow. I can help track game beyond the Badger Hills." He turned, concern sharpening his features. "This winter is cruel. The passes are treacherous. Wolves roam. The plains, desperate as we are." Her gaze held steady. "The tribe depends on me. I must do what I can." Lone Elk exhaled in silent frustration but relented. "I will prepare arrows for you. When the sun rises, I will join the hunters and ride before them." By midday, the sky was a flat grey, light diffusing like a pallid lantern through the clouds. Elysia joined a dozen hunters, men and women clad in fur-lined robes and painted hides, at the edge of the camp. Their horses' coats were thick, with snow breath frosted in the air. The chief's eldest son, Makwa Standing Bear, greeted her with a nod, offering a snow-caked bow. "May the Great Spirit guide your aim, daughter of the plains." Elysia took the bow with a solemn bow of her head. "I will not fail." Makwa's gaze flicked toward the mountains looming at the valley's edge. "The last herd we saw was near the ridge, but the snow has covered their tracks. We must move carefully." They set off in single file, horses picking their way over the frost-hardened ground. Elysia rode with the hunters, her senses on high alert. The world felt stripped bare by winter's grip, an austere landscape of grey rock and white drifts. Every gust of wind carried the keening cry of ravens, circling in restless spirals. Hours passed with no sign of elk or buffalo. Just when fatigue threatened to dull her concentration, Elysia spotted a flicker of movement at the junction of two ravines, a dark shape moving against the snow's blank expanse. She nudged her horse closer, motioning to Makwa and the others. They dismounted, sliding quietly from their saddles to stalk the animal. The shape resolved into a lone elk bull, its coat the color of burnished copper. It stood stock still, nostrils flaring in the cold air. Makwa drew an arrow, placing its shaft gently on the bow's string. Elysia watched, breath held as he aimed. The bull pawed at the snow, anticipating danger. Suddenly a cry rang out, a harsh, resonant howl. Wolves emerged from the thicket, 6 in number, their coats mottled grey and white, eyes shining with feral hunger. They snapped at the elk's flanks. Emboldened by the creature's isolation, Makwa cursed under his breath. "The wolves will scatter it. We have to drive them off." An arrow hissed from the bow. A wolf yelped as it took the shaft to its flank. The remaining wolves snarled, circling as they eyed Elysia and the hunters. The elk, spooked, bolted, leaving the wounded wolf behind. Elysia's pulse thundered. She notched an arrow, drawing the string with trembling fingers. A wolf lunged toward, her jaws open in a savage snarl. Elysia exhaled a prayer and loosed the arrow. It flew true, piercing the wolf's shoulder. The animal yowled, collapsing onto its side. The other wolves hesitated, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. Makwa dropped an arrow into his bow, loosing it with a calm grace that belied the chaos. The wolf closest to him collapsed in the snow, its howl cut short. Panicked, the remaining wolves scattered into the thicket, wounded and vanishing beneath the storm's hush. The elk bull, freed from the predators, bolted toward the ridge, leaving a spray of copper flashes in its wake. Elysia released the tension in her shoulders, nodding to Makwa. "It's heading north. We can intercept near the ridge." They mounted quickly, spurs digging into flanks. The chase began, a test of endurance as the elk bounded across snowdrifts, lungs expelling great puffs of steam. The hunters rode with disciplined precision, keeping pace despite the terrain's treacherous turns. Elysia gripped the bow tightly, eyes tracking the elk's movements. When they closed the distance, Makwa raised his arm, a signal. Elysia steered her horse into position, drawing her arrow with a steadying breath. The elk paused at the crest of a steep incline, silhouetted against the pale sky. Muscles rippled. Beneath its hide, as it searched for the source of its pursuers, Elysia's world narrowed to the moment. Arrow, target, the beat of her heart. She exhaled, the arrow soaring and finding its mark just behind the elk's shoulder. The creature bucked, staggering as the arrow's impact wrenched its ribs. It bolted, collapsing in the snow at the hillside's edge. Elysia and Makwa dismounted, approaching the wounded bull with reverence. The elk's breath rattled, each inhale a struggle. Elysia knelt, placing a consoling hand on its flank. "Thank you for your sacrifice," she whispered. She aimed a silver-tipped arrow at its heart, releasing it with a prayer. The arrow found its mark, and the bull's body relaxed into the snow's embrace. A hush fell over the hunters as they circled the fallen elk. They knelt in unison, offering prayers to the Great Spirit, asking forgiveness and giving thanks for the life that would sustain them. Elysia bowed her head, tears tracing cold lines down her cheeks. She felt the elk's spirit rising into the wind, a solemn grace carried away on feathered wings. Back at the camp, the elk's meat was shared among the people, filling the storerooms that threatened to run empty. Elysia watched as the hunters butchered the animal with practiced care, ensuring that no scrap was wasted. She felt both triumphant and hollow. She had helped secure food for her people, but each sacrifice writhed in her mind like a dying ember. That evening, the camp gathered in the central tepee, where the chief held council beside a crackling fire. The air was thick with the scent of roasting meat and spruce smoke. Elysia sat beside Lone Elk, who leaned heavily on a staff, carved with symbols of his ancestors. His shoulder wound, though healed, still stiffened his movements. The chief cleared his throat, drawing the assembly's attention. "This winter's harshness seeks to break us," he began, voice resonant. "But under the Daughter of the Plains' guidance, the spring endures and our hunts prosper. We must hold fast, for spring's waters and summer's bounty lie just beyond this frozen veil." Murmur of agreement rolled through the crowd. Elysia's heart fluttered with both pride and fear, pride for the role she had claimed, fear of the burdens yet to come. That night, Elysia dreamed of running water and green meadows. But when she awoke to the pale light of another frigid dawn, she sensed a presence at her tepee flap. She slipped from her furs, stepping into the cold, to find Makwa standing bare, waiting, face drawn with urgency. "We have word from the reservation," he said. "The white settlers to the northwest have discovered our spring. A scouting party of soldiers approaches. They intend to claim these waters for themselves." Elysia's breath caught. "Soldiers? How many?" Makwa's gaze darkened. "A company of 10, armed and determined. They arrive at supper time. We have but hours to prepare." Lone Elk appeared at her side, his expression grim. "The white men will not respect our claim. They will seek to drive us from the spring." Elysia's spine straightened. "Then we must show them the bond between this land and our people. We must make them understand that the spring is life itself." Lone Elk shook his head, sorrow in his eyes. "Some men see only a resource to be possessed. They kill what they do not understand." Elysia placed a hand on his cheek, searching his gaze. "We will stand together. I will not fail you, not after all we have endured." Lone Elk nodded, exhaling. Slowly, "Then let us prepare. We have nothing left to lose but fear." The sun sank low on the horizon, igniting the sky in fiery streaks of crimson and violet. At the edge of the valley, the soldiers arrived on horseback, leather coats creased by dust and frost. Leading them was Captain Thomas Overton, a hard-faced, man with cold blue eyes that scrutinized the Lakota camp with disdain. His uniform bore the insignia of the territorial militia, a star upon his chest, glinting in the dying light. Makwa and 6 warriors rode out to meet them, red paint streaked across their faces in a show of solemn protection. Elysia and Lone Elk stood behind them, cloaked in furs, hands resting on their bows. The camp fell silent as the soldiers dismounted, boots thudding against the snow. Captain Overton surveyed the scene. "You people, this land is claimed by the United States. We have orders to seize this water source for the settlers' use. Step aside, and you will be left in peace. Refuse, and we will clear you out." Elysia stepped forward, chest puffed with steel. "This water belongs to the Lakota. Our people have tended these grounds since time beyond memory. We will not relinquish it." Overton's lips curled. "A girl's defiance means nothing. You will be moved aside." Makwa raised a hand, motioning for peace. "There is enough water for all, but you must respect our ways. We ask a simple trade, safe passage for your company in return for a share of the spring's bounty." Overton's laugh was icy. "We do not trade with savages. We claim what we please." A hush fell as tension coiled between them like a rattlesnake ready to strike. Elysia drew an arrow from her quiver, laying it upon her bow's string. She stepped to Lone Elk's side, her voice unwavering. "You seek to take by force that which we offer in peace. Then so be it. We will defend our home." Overton's face hardened. He raised his pistol. "Then draw your weapons. Soldiers, advance on my command." At his word, the soldiers stepped forward, rifles aimed squarely at the Lakota line. For a moment, time froze, 2 worlds standing on the knife's edge. Suddenly a boom rolled from behind the soldiers, a cannon blast sounding its fury across the valley. The earth tremored beneath Elysia's feet. Snow sprayed into the air as the cannonball tore through the frozen ground. Everyone's eyes snapped toward the eastern pass. A lone rider, cloak flapping like a storm cloud, thundered toward the camp. His horse's flank was flecked with sweat, mane matted with snow. He carried no banner, only the seal of the territorial governor pinned to his chest. The rider halted beside Elysia, dismounting with the bear-like strength of a man accustomed to power. It was Deputy Marshal Daniel Creighton, his dark hair flecked with frost, cloak dusted white. "Captain Overton," Daniel's voice boomed, "by order of the governor, this spring is recognized as sovereign Lakota land. You are to withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Overton's face drained of blood. He stammered, I have orders." Daniel cocked his pistol, its hammer clicking like a warning. "Those orders are revoked. The governor stands with the Lakota rights to these waters. If you fire a shot, you will be tried for treason." The soldiers hesitated, glancing at the gleaming cannon behind them and then at the harsh line of Lakota warriors in reddened paint. Overton's jaw clenched. He spat into the snow. "You would betray your own." Daniel's gaze hardened. "I would serve justice, withdraw, or be branded traitors." Overton's fury flared, but when he saw the determined faces of his men faltering, he raised a white flag and turned. The soldiers filed back to their mounts, muttering under their breaths. Elysia exhaled, the tension melting into the evening air. She turned to Daniel. "You saved us. Why?" He met her gaze, sincerity flickering in his dark eyes. "Because your fight is just, and because Lone Elk saved my life on the Badger Hills." Lone Elk stepped forward, hand extended. "You and your people may stay, Marshal. The spring's waters shall flow for you too if you honor our ways." Daniel took his hand, bowing his head in quiet respect. "I will honor my word." The camp erupted in cheers, the Lakota's war drums beating triumphantly. Elysia felt something shift deep within her, pride, relief, and a fierce joy that burned brighter than any winter fire. As the soldiers retreated into the darkness, their horses' hoofbeats echoing like distant thunder, Elysia turned to Lone Elk. He pressed a hand to her cheek, snowflakes melting on her lashes. "We have won this day, but our journey continues," he whispered. She nodded, gazing at the frozen spring that lay between them, a lifeline forged in blood and honor. She felt, in that moment, the full weight of her promise, to guard these waters, to stand unbroken against those who would threaten them, and to forge a future where two worlds could coexist in fragile harmony. And as the moon climbed above the valley, silvering the snow with its light, Elysia Mercer, daughter of the plains, embraced her destiny, her heart beating in time with the spring's eternal song. Night's chill settled over the valley like a velvet cloak. Stars scattered across the sky, each a distant promise of warmth and renewal. Yet the air beneath them remained cold, an austere reminder of winter's reign. Elysia stood at the spring's edge, gazing into its clear depths. The water, glowing faintly beneath moonlight, rippled gently as if whispering secrets of seasons yet to come. She felt Lone Elk's presence before she saw him, his steady footsteps muffled against the icy ground. He joined her at the water's edge, hands tucked into his furs, breath misting in the air, fear and relief swirled in his dark eyes. "Some nights I dream of summer," he murmured. Wildflowers blazing across the plains, buffalo herds thunder beyond the river. Elysia smiled, though her heart ached with longing. "Soon, Lone Elk, the lake will thaw, the grasses will grow. Until then, we hold watch." He wrapped an arm around her, drawing her close. "You have been steadfast at my side. I fear for you, Elysia. The soldiers will not forget this victory. The settlers grow restless with hunger for land and water." She leaned into his warmth, her breath hitching. "Then we fight, as we have, with heart, with honor, and with the spirits guiding us. I belong here, as do you. We will protect our home." He pressed his forehead to hers, a vow in silence. The stillness of night pressed around them, a fragile veil before dawn's first light. Winter's grip began to loosen as February stirred. The winds of change. The snow receded from the plains in scattered patches, and the horses' tracks became visible once more. The tribe worked tirelessly, repairing lodges and stockpiling food for the coming spring. Among them, Elysia moved with purpose, her once foreign hands now skilled at braiding willow baskets, stacking firewood, and tending the sick. One morning, as she retrieved water from the spring, a cry shattered the valley's hush. Elysia's heart leaped as she recognized the panicked tones of a young warrior. "They're coming!" She raised her head, scanning the eastern horizon. A cloud of dust billowed across the plain, hundreds of riders moving like a tide of malice. The Lakota scouts had returned, eyes wide with urgency. "They ride for us." Lone Elk emerged from behind, a copse of cottonwoods, his spear in hand. His face was painted with black lines of war, the red streak of courage marking his cheek. Elysia met his gaze, fear and determination mirrored in his dark eyes. "What are they?" she asked, voice tight. A scout galloped up, reining in his horse. "The settlers have gathered a militia from the nearest fort. They come with rifles, wagons, and more soldiers than we can count. They bring iron cannons. They will lay siege to the spring." Elysia's chest tightened. "They can't take the spring. We must not let them." Lone Elk nodded, voice low. "We will hold them. We fight for this land." A council was called beneath the main tepee. The chief, his staff carved with stories of ancestors, addressed the gathering. "Our foes come as a storm. They seek to claim our spring, our home. We must stand together. Sons and daughters, take up arms. Daughters of the plains, let our hearts be strong. We will not yield." Desperate prayers rose above the crackling flames. Elysia felt her resolve crystallize. This battle would be the fiercest test of all. The morning light revealed the enemy's numbers. Dozens of wagons laden with supplies, horses snorting in readiness, soldiers marching in rigid formation. Overton had returned, now with fresh orders and new men. He wore a sneer as he surveyed the Lakota encampment. Captain Overton raised his pistol. "Lakota dogs, leave this spring at once, or we fire." Lone Elk stepped forward, bow in hand. "These lands are ours. If you value your lives, leave now." Overton spat. "Then stand and face the consequences." The soldiers lined up behind Overton, rifles glinting in the sun. Among them a cannon loomed, a menacing iron beast on wooden wheels. Its barrel glowed like a coal beneath the morning sky. Alicia raised her bow, her heart pounding. For the spring! With a thunderous roar, the cannon fired, the blast shaking the earth and sending snow plumes into the air. The Lakota line held, eyes narrowed as they braced for impact. Smoke and frost mingled as the second shot thundered from the cannon, sending men and horses stumbling. Overton signaled the soldiers forward, and the battle erupted in a cacophony of sound. Rifles cracked, war cries soared, and the ground beneath them trembled. Alicia loosed arrow after arrow, each finding its mark in the enemy. Lone Elk moved, with lethal grace, his spear flashing in the sun as he felled foes in swift succession. The Lakota warriors pressed the attack, riding horses through the enemy's ranks, their rifles thunderous and precise. The settlers, inexperienced in this terrain, faltered. When they attempted to bring the cannon closer, a group of Lakota warriors, led by Makwa Standing Bear, ambushed them from the flanks, scattering the horses and disabling the cannon's wheels. Overton, enraged, charged toward Lone Elk, sword raised. Alicia's arrow struck him in the leg, sending him crashing to the ground. He rose with furious determination, swinging his sword toward Lone Elk's head. Lone Elk ducked, countering with his spear, driving it through Overton's shoulder. Overton screamed, collapsing into the snow. As the smoke cleared, the settlers wavered, fear seeping into their ranks. Their command structure had crumbled, leaving them exposed to the relentless Lakota onslaught. And yet, amid the fierce melee, Alicia spotted a figure moving behind the enemy lines, a cavalry officer scouting for a weak point. A chill ran through her. The figure wore the uniform of the Federal Army, not a militiaman. He carried a dispatch from the territorial governor's office. Reinforcements were en route. She raced across the battlefield, dodging gunfire and trampled snow. She reached the officer just as he raised a bugle to his lips. She tackled him, pinning him against the frigid earth. "Stop!" she cried, pressing her palm to his chest. "No more blood!" The officer's eyes met hers, confusion and conflict swirling within their pale blue depths. "Let me go!" Lone Elk arrived, placing his spear at the officer's throat. "You sound the horn, and you die." Alicia knelt beside the officer, her voice pleading. "Lady Hawthorne, stand down. I know you serve the governor. You must remember the treaty. You must save these people from this bloodbath." The woman's gaze flickered, recognition dawning. "Alicia? It is you? But you are... I did not expect..." Back then, she had been the governor's aide, a diplomat's daughter, eager, poised to broker peace between settlers and the Lakota. They had met once during a trading fair a year ago. The memory surfaced like a shard of warmth. "Lady Hawthorne, think of your father's treaty. This fighting will only bring more blood and grief. Stop now, please." The cavalry officer's bugle lay half buried in the snow, the metal tarnished by frost. She glanced at Lone Elk's spear, then at Alicia's steady gaze. Slowly, she nodded, raising her hand. "I concede." Lone Elk lowered his spear, and Alicia helped the officer to her feet. "Ride back. Tell them the Lakota defend their spring with honor, and no more men shall come to die for water." The officer saluted, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I will tell them." As she astride her horse, Hawthorne glanced back at Alicia, admiration, mingling with sadness. "Your destiny shines brighter than any prophecy. May it guide you well." The cavalry trotted away, the sound of hoofbeats fading like a sorrowful hymn. Elysia watched until the lone bugle call lost itself in the wind. She turned, heart pounding, to find the battlefield littered with fallen soldiers and warriors, the bitter taste of victory, bitter and sweet, clinging to her tongue. Night had fallen again as the Lakota gathered to bury their dead. The sky was a brittle tapestry of stars, the air cold enough to freeze tears. Elysia knelt by a shallow grave, tears carving icy paths across her cheeks as she laid a hand on Lone Elk's unyielding frame. He had ridden through the battle's fury, shielding her from harm at every turn, sword still torn by Overton's blade. Makwa approached, his face grave. He bore a carving of a bear entwined with an eagle, symbols of strength and vision. He pressed it into Elysia's palm. "A gift for you, daughter of the plains. You have guided us through darkness. May these symbols protect you." Elysia bowed, her head embracing the weight of the gift. She pressed the carving to her heart, feeling its warmth spread like dawn's first light. Lone Elk knelt beside her, his strength drained, but spirit unbroken. Winter is nearly past. Once the snow melts, new life will bloom. You have kept the spring song alive. You have saved our people. A tremor passed through Elysia. But at what cost? I have seen too much death, too much grief. He bowed his head, lips brushing her forehead. Your heart remains unbroken. Let the spring's waters wash away your sorrow. Snowdrifts drifted between, them like frozen echoes. The torches cast long shadows across the valley floor. Elysia's tears fell silently, each one a promise to carry their sacrifice with honor. Spring arrived in a riot of color. The valley bloomed with wildflowers, blankets of lupine, crimson Indian paintbrush, and golden sunflowers swaying beneath the sun's gentle warmth. The buffalo herds returned, their thunderous presence rattling the earth. The Lakota danced. Beneath open skies, their songs rising like incense on the breeze. Elysia stood at the spring's edge, watching a child splash in its clear waters. He was a boy of 8, dark curls plastered to his scalp, laughter echoing across the valley. Lone Elk approached, bow strapped to his back, spear swinging at his side. He rested a hand on her shoulder. "Look at what you have created. Life returned to the land you saved." Elysia surveyed the scene, families gathering berries, warriors returning from hunts, children learning to track footprints in the soft earth. A sense of peace flooded her chest. "I never could have done this alone," she whispered. "You taught me what it means to fight for something larger than myself." He smiled, dark eyes warm. "And you showed me that compassion bridges worlds." Elysia knelt, pressing a hand to the spring's edge. "May this water always flow. May our people always remember the cost of peace." She closed her eyes, letting the breeze carry her prayer across the valley. Lone Elk knelt beside her, pressing his forehead to hers. "You will remain as guardian of the spring." Her breath trembled, the weight of responsibility humming within. Her bones, but joy blossomed in her heart. Joy for the land, for the people, and for the love that had carried her through the darkest winter. "I will," she vowed, voice steady as the spring's flow. "As long as I draw breath, I will stand watch." He rose, wrapping her in his arms. Above them, the sky arched in a pristine blue, the promise of summer's warmth unfurling. Middle of Part 5. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. A celebration unfolded at twilight, a communal feast around the spring. Elders offered prayers, smoke from cedar boughs rising into the crimson sky. Elysia and Lone Elk danced at the center, their steps lightened by hope and love. The carvings of the bear and eagle rested against her heart, a tangible reminder of unity. Captain Overton, sober and humbled, approached the dancers. He knelt before them, offering a leather satchel filled with supplies, tools, fabric, and metal implements that would help the Lakota build winter stores and improve their lodges. "I came to atone for my sins," he said, voice low. "My men and I, we owe you our lives. Accept this gift as repayment." Lone Elk placed a hand on Overton's shoulder. "Your gift is accepted when you honor our people. Build no forts on these lands. Claim no waters." Overton bowed his head. "I swear it." He rose and wove through the crowd, depositing the satchel. By the ceremonial fire, "May the Great Spirit guide us all." The feast resumed, laughter and conversation weaving with the crackling flames. Alicia sipped a cup of sweetgrass tea, its aroma comforting. She glanced at Lone Elk, who watched her with a tenderness that scorched her fingertips. "Tomorrow the elders will name me High Guardian of the Spring," she said softly. He lifted her chin with his fingertips. "Every dawn and dusk, you watch over these waters. Every child who drinks from this spring will know your name." Alicia's heart fluttered. "I have found my place, but my journey continues." Lone Elk drew her close, lips brushing her ear. "Wherever your path leads, mine will walk beside you." She closed her eyes, letting the faith in his words steady her. The future unfurled before them like a tapestry, imperfect yet vibrant with promise. As the night deepened, the stars reflected in the rippling spring, and Alicia whispered her final vow to the land. "I will protect this place, this people, and this love until my last breath." End of final part, part 5. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.